This episode is brought to you by Roundtable Group, the experts on experts. We've been connecting attorneys with experts for over 25 years. Find out more at roundtablegroup.com.
Welcome to Discussions at the Roundtable. I'm your host, Noah Balmer. Today's guest is Professor Robert J. Romano. Now, Professor Romano is an assistant professor at St. John's University in the Division of Sport Management and an adjunct professor at Quinnipiac. He teaches a diverse course load on a range of topics from ethical and legal considerations in sport management to sports history and even sports social media. Additionally, Professor Romano maintains a robust legal practice with over 25 years of experience focusing on transactional law, mainly for a client base of entertainers, sports figures, and businesses. He's a well-published author and a sought-after critic and advocate and an experienced expert witness as well. Professor Romano has a JD from Loyola, a master's in sports management from Columbia University, and LLMs from both St. John's University and Instituto Superior de Derecho y Economía in Madrid. Professor Romano, it's an absolute pleasure to have you on the show today.
Well, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. I really like the way you pronounce the name of my university there. You know, most of the time people just look at it and go, okay.
Hey, I have to take every opportunity to practice my Spanish that I can.
Fantastic. That was great.
All right, let's jump into it. So you've been teaching and advocating in the sports field for decades. Have you always really had a passion for sports?
I was an athlete. I mean, my passion started when I was an athlete back in high school and college.
What'd you play?
I played football. I wrestled, and I ran track.
Wow.
But I got asked to play at Springfield College up in Massachusetts. Played at that university until I got hurt. So, and then, then I saw how the process really works. Once you're injured, kind of things disappear, like your scholarship or the tutors or the better meals or whatever that is. So I kind of saw from a different perspective of what happens to an athlete once they're no longer of value to a university.
Did that kind of drive your advocacy?
Not initially. I mean, I think as I got older, then reflected back on it, and I looked at it in a different perspective as I educated myself, and I was like, oh, wait a minute. Aren't we supposed to take care of our student athletes? Aren't we supposed to take care of our students? Aren't they students first before athletes? That kind of stuff.
So, how did you take all of that? Your experience as an athlete obviously led you into something sports adjacent, but why teaching?
Teaching, that's a great question. I didn't want to teach. I didn't know I wanted to teach. I was at Columbia University. I was getting my master's in my MBA with a concentration in sports management at Columbia. And the director of the program came to me and said, you know what, I really would like for you to teach the sports history class. And I'm like, yeah, I'm not going to do that. I got to practice. I'm taking these classes. I don't have time for this. He goes, no, I really want you to do it. And I'm going to slot you in for next fall semester. And that was it. And I started teaching sports history right then. I found out that I really enjoyed it. I found out I was actually pretty good at it and wanted to continue. So I continued teaching at different universities. That next semester, I went over to St. John's and talked to their director, Glenn Gerstner at the time, and said, I'm interested in teaching here. And he's like, you don't have any experience. I said, well, I taught one class. Come on, that's enough experience.
That's experience.
And lo and behold, the professor who was teaching the sports law class bowed out at the last minute. I had 3 days notice, and I was slotted to teach sports law at St. John's in that next spring. And then, of course, Glenn Gerstner called me up the night before classes started and said, you know what, we got hospitality law too, so I'm going to slot you in for that. So that was back in 2011, and I've been at St. John's pretty much ever since.
So is this prior to you acquiring your JD?
No, my career is kind of weird. I went to undergrad. I was an undergrad at Springfield College. I went and got my JD at Loyola University down there in New Orleans. And then I did what every good law school grad does. I went and didn't practice law. I was a comedy writer. And I did comedy for a few years. I did stand-up improv. I think like some of us here have done some improv, and just basically wrote comedy, wrote scripts, that kind of stuff. And I circled back at one of my reunions with the guy I played football with at Springfield. And he's like, you're in that entertainment world. I'm in the sports world. Why don't we, combine forces and see what we can do? And
Sure.
that's where I started working on the agent kind of side. I went and got to be a certified NFL rep. I was certified for a number of years. And it was during that time frame that I said, well, you know what? To better serve my clients, I should go back and educate myself just a little bit more. And I went back to Columbia and got my master's degree at that time. So it was years
Oh,
that I did that because I wanted to, wanted to give my clients more value, actually.
sure.
And I thought that would be interesting. I'd educate myself, then I could educate my clients. But then the teaching came into it, and that's where I went back again and got my LLM in international
I see.
sports law. I felt that would be added value because in academia, the JD is a terminal degree, but
Right.
sometimes PhDs they look. I'm not going to say they look down on it, but they look down on it. Right. So I figured, well, let me, I have this opportunity to get my LLM, and it's something I'm passionate about. I might as well get it done. And I spent a little over a year doing that.
Sure. Wow, that's quite the circuitous route. But you're not the only one. I'm a JD who's conducting a podcast with expert witnesses. So here we go.
You never know where. I tell that to my client. You never know where you're going to end up. You never know where your career is going to lead you. You're always going to, and there are paths that'll open up or doors that'll open up that you may want to step through that may not be what the traditional graduate does. That kind of thing.
Sure. So did your career as an expert precede, or did it happen after you had already had an established law practice?
Oh, so it started while I was practicing law.
Okay.
I started getting asked to be an expert in different areas, and then it predominantly shifted to predominantly sport after gaining my LLM.
Oh, okay.
That's where I would say all my experience now as an expert is in the area of sport. Before that it was a little varied, but now it's just definitely in that sports area.
So prior to becoming an expert witness, had you as an attorney employed expert witnesses?
Yes.
So you kind of knew what works and what doesn't, right? You kind of knew what to expect as an expert witness. That's not a position that a lot of the experts that I interview have, that kind of perspective. So how are those two things different? How is it different? What would you tell yourself as an attorney, as an expert? What are the things that attorneys can do to better prepare a new expert that doesn't have that experience yet?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think letting them in on the timeline, that kind of stuff. Once that case gets, calendared or the trial management gets accepted by the court, I think it'd be important to let the expert know that these are our dates that we have to get discovery and depositions and everything done by, our final close our pleadings, all that kind of stuff. I think, if you allow the expert to know that, it lets them know where we are in the case. So I always ask for the trial management or whatever jurisdiction I'm in, what they call it. So I know, okay, we're still in discovery phase. This is where I need to be in my drafting of my expert report.
Okay.
I know that my deposition is going to be coming up, soon, because now we're getting into that phase. Let me make sure that my report is getting finalized, so I'm prepared. So when I get that call, on Friday saying, yeah, you're scheduled to get deposed on Tuesday, I'll be like, okay, I'm good, I'm ready.
What are the questions that experts should be asking their attorneys when they first get that call, and they're evaluating whether or not they want to even say yes to the project? What are the most important things that they should know? How do you know that your expertise is sufficient for the thing that they're asking of you?
That's a great question. That's a long. I find I'd like a longer interview on that. Sometimes they'll schedule me for like a 15 minutes.
Okay.
They'll call me up and they'll say, we want a 15-minute chat with you to see if you're a good fit for us. But I'm like, I don't know. I want to know more about your case. I want to know what side you're on. First off, you're the plaintiff, you're the defendant. What is your position on this? Why are you defending this? I really want to get into a little bit more of the facts, a little bit more of the details, and then I'll ask where you are in the process, because sometimes I don't get retained until later in the process,
Sure.
or in the beginning part. So I want to know where we are, and then I also want to know what's the likelihood of settlement.
Okay.
Is this case is this a case that's going to settle? Is it going to settle next week, or is it a case that's going to settle at the eve of trial? Because sometimes they're already in settlement negotiations. So why, they're retaining me because the deadlines are coming up, but they're in pretty involved settlement discussions that is probably
Sure.
going to settle. So I'd want to know that beforehand, because if I'm going to put all my time and effort into something and then it settles, it's like, okay, we're what you should have told me this beforehand, before I started really doing a deep dive into it. And I think that serves the attorney's clients too, because now they're not paying my fee, they're maybe only paying a quarter of the fee instead of 2/3 of the fee, because, they let me know that we're pretty close to settlement, that kind of stuff.
No, that's an interesting that's an interesting point. So when you have a pay, different people charge different things, right? Some people do an hourly, some people do by project, some people have differing, like what you just said, maybe if it's at the beginning of the case it's one rate, and if it's kind of at the end or more narrowly tailored engagement, then you might have a different rate. So how do you develop all of that? How do you as an expert prepare yourself for those eventualities?
On the pay side, or
Right. Yeah,
yeah, so that's learned. That's probably one of the more difficult things to learn. I mean, I think that comes with experience. I've gotten to the point where I'm going to want hourly rates for all my prep work and where I'm my report and all that stuff. But I want fixed rates if you're going to ask me to testify.
Oh, okay.
That's fixed. That's going to change over. I'm not going to do an hourly rate there. No, if you want me to testify at a depot, it's a flat fee. If you want me to testify at trial, then it's another flat fee. So that way I know if let's say I fly to San Francisco to get the deposition or go to trial and it settles at the eve of trial, well, I'm guaranteed the fee. I didn't put
Sure.
those hours in because I didn't testify, but listen, I prepped all the time. I was there. I was ready to go. At least I'm going to get compensated for my time.
So how much negotiating power does a potential expert witness have? In other words, how proactive can they be vis-a-vis rates and the like?
It depends on how badly that they want that expert. I mean, just like I mean, it's the leverage thing. I mean, you feel that out in that initial interview. Is this just somebody they want to hire because the other side hired 3 experts, so we need to hire 3 experts,
Sure.
that kind of thing, or is it really I've written in this area, I've got some really good expertise in this area. They really want me because I'm the person that's going to sway that jury. Well, then you got a little more bargaining power on that. So I mean, I negotiate. I'll go back and forth until we're both comfortable.
So you mentioned the topic of how good of an expert, how much expertise do you have as an expert? How do you maintain that? How do you not only become an expert, but like how do you stay an expert in such a broad field? I mean, you're in sports. There's a million sports out there. I'm not a sportsologist, but I've heard that there's several, and they all have different rules, and these contracts are all written differently. And you even have international experience, which throws even more wrenches into that.
Yeah.
So how do you maintain a level of expertise that's attractive to lawyers without spending all of your time doing nothing but researching the minutia of the ever-changing dynamic laws of sports?
I think it comes from I write a lot. I mean, so I stay on top of the subject matter because I write. I probably write 2 articles a month. And
Wow.
So on current topics, what's going on in the world of sports, what's happening with the coach and I'm not going to name any names in New York, who
Sure.
got terminated. What are the crux? What's that appeal about? What not the appeal? What's that arbitration about? Those kind of things. So I consistently write about stuff. I also go to a lot of conferences. I mean, that's where I like to hear what other people are saying and what their opinions are, because they may have something that I haven't thought about. So I think those are 2 ways that I go about making sure I'm on top of what's happening. But I also my specialty is also more in the area of value, in value,
Okay.
the value of an athlete. If they get hurt or if something tragic happens to them, what their
I
actual
see.
value is. So I mean, it's a sport, but it's kind of like whittled down within sport.
So there's general applicability to that, right? Like just about anybody in any field should be going to conferences and staying up on things. In authorship, that is important, right? Like, would you say that on bank doing a good amount of writing keeps you not only on top of the current topics, but also in the view of people who might use your services? Is that also advertisement of a type?
It's creating awareness about yourself. I think so. I mean, I get a call every once in a while. Hey Rob, I read your piece in the Sports Business Journal, and let's have a conversation about it. You got time to chat with me about this kind of stuff, and I'll be happy to. That happened maybe 4-6 weeks ago, from an athletic director up in the Northeast to call me up. He said, I didn't understand this about international athletes. You got time? You got a couple of minutes to chat with me? Sure. That kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I think that's important, keeping your name out there so people are, oh yeah, it's Romano. Yeah, he's writing about this stuff. Yeah. Yeah. He's the man I want to talk to. Yeah.
So do you find that your name gets out there in that manner? So once people start using you, you kind of develop a reputation for being a good expert?
I think that's part of it. I also think, being there. I mean, doing the work when you're asked to be an expert, actually creating that report that makes sense, reading all the other experts' reports and evaluating what they have to say. And not, does it influence you or not? No, but at least I know what the perspective is from a different viewpoint. So yeah. I think it's important, but that's just me. So
Let's talk about some cases. Can you talk about any cases that you've been involved in? Obviously, our listeners know that we can't give specifics. There's a lot of legal peril in getting too specific. But are there any interesting or unusual situations, or situations that you feel have some kind of general applicability to potential expert witnesses and attorneys?
sure. I mean, in generalities, I'd be happy to talk about, stuff that
Sure.
I've experienced. I think one of the more interesting things that happened was, I got called. It was probably in the late afternoon, to be an expert on an issue, and they were like, "Okay, but our hearing's tomorrow
Hmm.
at 3 o'clock and via Zoom. It's going to be via Zoom," and I'm like, okay, right. And and it was in an area that I was familiar with, but I wanted to do a little bit of research on.
Sure.
And the attorneys met with me. I think it was like 6:30 or 7 o'clock. We met for an hour, and they got the understanding where they wanted to go with the case, what the issues were. I prepped that night and was ready to go. First chance the next day. So, I mean, that stuff's going to happen. It's not going to happen often because I think, but this wasn't a trial. This was an administrative hearing. And I think at the last
Right.
minute they got called in and like, oh, we don't have an expert in this area. Let's get somebody. And in all honesty, I had a blast doing it. Because it was kind of a laid back administrative hearing. The administrative judge was really interested in what I had to say about this, because it was like, well, tell me more about that. How, why do we do that this way? What's the history? Because there's a history to why we do things in sport. And the
Sure.
administrative judge was really interested in that. And that made it fun for me. Not like I was educating the judge, but just letting the court know that this is why we do things a little bit differently in the area of sport.
That's interesting. I've talked to a good number of experts, and some of their advice has been don't offer up anything more than is asked. Has that
Mhm.
been your experience as well? And I guess in that situation, you were talking about the judge was specifically asking for that. So, of course, you offered it up. But is that, in general, is that what you would advise?
I think so. I think, you don't want to open the door up to something that may harm a client.
Sure.
You don't want to do that. And especially you don't want to on cross, keep it simple. Yes, no, you let the attorney work for the answer. If they're, if they didn't do their homework, if he or she didn't do their homework, and they don't work for it, then they're not going to get it.
Has a significant portion of your work been gone to trial? Have you had to deal with cross a lot?
I had not a lot, not a lot. But I have been a number of times I've been cross-examined. Yeah. Probably in the area of 5 to 7.
What kinds of strategies do you employ for that? How do you stay calm, cool, and collected during cross-examination?
I just stay prepared. That's the only thing you can do. I think you stay prepared.
Right.
Not you got to understand. You got to read all the expert reports, understand where they're going, where they came to their conclusions. Do some background on them. Because their sources may not be all that good. Or they may be great. I don't know. But they may say, well, our expert, disagrees and this is why. And I'm like, well, that's a bullshit report. So, so of course I'm not going to agree with them. So I think doing your homework, staying on top of what the other experts reports are, and then doing a deeper dive into how they came to their conclusions helps you a lot on cross.
That's an interesting topic. Not only are you obviously at opposition to the attorney on the other side, but to the witnesses that they have, and that they've probably done their oppositional research on you because they're going to try and impeach your expertise. So I guess all of the things that you talked about come together as a bulwark against that, being prepared, being an actual expert in your field and understanding the specifics of the case.
Yeah. Well, an interesting story on that. And I was involved in a trial one time where I was an expert on one side and my former professor was an expert on the other side.
Oh no.
So that was fun because, when he was up there, he was saying, well, he doesn't, I thought I taught him better than that. And,
He said that in court.
Yeah. Anyway, he's a great guy. And I was kind of laughing about it, so that was an interesting dynamic. Having both of us, the teacher and the student, both as the experts, but it made me proud. And I think it made him proud also.
That's great.
Yeah.
Before we wrap up, I do want to pivot to just some general advice. I've spoken to many experts who have told me, what makes a successful relationship between an attorney and expert, but as both an attorney and an expert, what are the crucial pieces of advice that you would give to both attorneys and to experts, especially newer experts who aren't sure exactly what they're getting themselves into? What are the most important things you'd like to drive home?
Communicate and respect each other. I mean, I think that's the two things. Communicate, have open lines of communication. I understand, we all understand everybody's busy. A lot of things are going on. But if you retain me as your expert, let's have that open dialogue there. And then the respect. There's respect between the two. And I think that's important. I think if you show respect, you'll get that respect back. And, you asked about that, for cross-examination too. I respect the other side. I respect that they're working hard. And I think that when I show them respect, it's hard for them not to show me the respect that I deserve. I show deference always show deference to the court, but I always show deference to the attorneys. I mean, for the most part, they're working hard. So I think that's important also. So communication and respect.
That's great advice. That's going to wrap it up for us today. Thank you so much, Professor Romano, for joining me here today. And I hope our listeners will join me again soon for another discussion at the Roundtable. Cheers.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to our podcast, Discussions at Roundtable. Our show notes are available on our website, roundtablegroup.com. Subscribe today on Apple Podcasts or your favorite listening apps.